I've enjoyed the process of creating conversations with Glen Taylor immensely. Across the dozens of interviews I've conducted, there have been nuggets of content that were engaging, but didn't quite fit into the context of an episode. This episode allows me the opportunity to explore that content. We start with, who is Glen Taylor?
To understand the person, you need to understand where Glen Taylor came from. And Glen Taylor has never forgotten where he came from.
I think they had to work hard in that family. If it's a 160-acre farm, you got to work hard. You got to work hard, and you learn that as a young person. I think it stayed with him, and that's just a part of who he is.
He loves to work and loves his work, and even his play is work, right? The things that he liked to do, right? When we were kids, he would either be reading and sitting and doing work, or he'd be outside. We'd be doing, chores. We lived in the town of Mankato. We didn't have a barn or anything, but we'd be out picking up sticks. That's the joke between my siblings. And I was like, hey, you've been picking up sticks, because that's what Dad would have us do. He was always kind of going, and I think that's how he grew up.
Our three kids graduated from high school, and Glen came over to all the graduation receptions. Well, Glen's a farm boy, and I mean a farm boy, and so am I. I was a dairy, he was in hogs, so we talked about our 4-H experience. That's another story. But he'd come over to our kids' reception. Loved it because my in-laws are big sugar beet farmers up northwest Minnesota. Very successful. Well, you can imagine. Glen is he's an agricultural nut, so to speak, and they would be in the corner of their lower level just talking farming or agriculture the whole time. And my in-laws thought he was the greatest guy in the world because who he was, what he was, and man, his interest and his expertise in agriculture.
He's always thinking, and he's always reading about a lot of nonfiction, a lot of business, a lot of books on business. He's always processing. It's part of his genius, and then something will just click, and financially he can just hear a few numbers and put that all together. So even though it's a 10-minute decision, it's all the background that he's done before that makes it special.
Glen can get to the point a lot quicker than most people by keeping things very simple, and that's what I appreciate about him. I also appreciate that he's given me a great opportunity here to be in this organization for over 25 years and really build my career.
I would just like to thank Glen Taylor for being a man of his word and giving opportunity and security to his employees. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have gotten to know him. And as a Minnesotan, I just can't thank him enough for what he's done for the community and for me personally.
We were both mathematics majors in college, so we kind of think the same way, think logical, sequentially, and there's just some people in life you meet and you click with, and that was the case for the two of us.
He never forgot what it was like to be on that printing press, the old Kensel hot stamper. He still could walk a mile in shoes that he had 50 years ago.
It's also his faith. I mean, this is a man of a very strong Christian faith in that regard. And he doesn't wear it on his lapel, but those of us that know him well know how important it is, for giving the glory to God. And that's being really humble. And then also giving back what you've been able to reap. And that's just the kid growing up on a farm is very important to him.
Glen would talk about the simpleness of a thank you and how much it would mean to people in his employee meetings and his mostly manager meetings, because he's talking to the management team and whatnot. And we would pass that down to employees and modeling that, and Glen always modeled it, saying thank you, and it isn't a hard thing to do, just to appreciate people.
We talked about how important just being a good person is and being kind. I think that starts at the very beginning of life. I think that starts with your family and how you were raised, and I think it's what you still see with Glen today. I know I learned that from my parents. Yep. I know I'm instilling it in my children, right? Yep. You can be really smart, you can be a great athlete, but if you're not kind, you're missing the boat.
Glen, I think, had a unique ability just to be common. He's got a commonness about him, which is neat. He's got his own "ah shucks, gosh darn" kind of phrases that I think serve him well. You know, I don't know if those came out of Comfrey, Minnesota, or he ginned them up, but anyway, they're kind of sweet and endearing for him. He makes a conscious decision not to curse or swear, but those are his curse and swear words. I find them pretty funny.
My dad always was, I would go with him sometimes. There were some people we knew that just didn't have much. We didn't have much either, but I would be with him in a car and he would just stop and he'd have a box of stuff that he would drop off at different homes. But his father did the same thing. It was just passed down from generation. You just do it. You do what's right and you care about other people. We just grew up with it. And you know, it didn't have to be preached to us. That's the way it was.
These are some of my favorite comments specific to Glen's approach, leadership style, and the relationships that were built through Taylor.
You know, being part of Taylor Corp those 40 years, it was never just a job. It was never just a job.
Probably his greatest legacy is going to be surrounding himself with people that he loved, that he cared for, that he wanted to make better, and it was reciprocal. And that's just really unique in my mind.
Every time you get a chance to hear him speak, he talks about the people he put around him and how they turned Taylor Corporation into what it is today. They made him into the the individual that he is today. That's very humble of him, but it's also something he's instilled in the leadership of our organization still today.
It was 40 years of 40 years of belonging to something that I think was truly special, and not that there aren't others, but I think we had something truly, truly special. And if it was just a job, you know, if we had felt, and most of us felt like it was just a job, I don't think we'd have been as successful as we were.
You had that support that they would be there when you were down and be there to high five you when you were up. And, you know, honestly, you know, in my 30s, my friends thought I was a workaholic. But why? It wasn't because anybody was telling me. No one was, no one was pushing me. No one was saying, you need to work more hours. It was because it was so much fun.
Glen just really kind of gave you a free rein to do what you needed to do. And I think that's why at that time for Taylor Corporation we were really successful, because it was like, well, we got to do this. You guys know what to do. Just do it.
I think people saw something so unique in Glen. First of all, he was very humble, very caring about all of his employees. They were number one with him.
That group of people that Glen built into that kind of original team, and he added people over time, the fact that they were able to work together so long and really get to know each other and build it together, I think was just crucial to embedding that culture. And, you know, and then I will say the fact that as a second generation, we admired that and we took it and we articulated it so it could be continued on. I think that's also been really important too, to give folks a way to talk about it, people across the country, people across the world.
I think he has a real gift for assessing people's talents and where they fit in an organization and that sort of thing. Obviously, you don't build an organization by yourself. It's almost the exact opposite. You build a great organization with a lot of great people.
I kind of remember the first time we visited the Glen's company down in Mankato. I remember walking in and seeing a big office with balloons all up, all over. And I said, boy, Glen must love parties or something. I said, what's the event? And so I asked and says, well, no, those are just rush orders. And so we laughed about that, and we went back there about 10 years later and took another tour, and the balloons were all gone. But what happened to the balloons? The computer took care of that.
He's looking for passion in individuals, And if you come back to him on something that you've talked to him about, and you're speaking with some conviction, there's a pretty good chance he's going to say, all right, let's try it. And you just admire that about him.
I think in Glen's DNA, he's intensely competitive, which I think resonates in a desire to be really good, so a desire for excellence. And I think those expectations he holds in Taylor Corporation or any of the corporations that he's involved in. He doesn't want slackers, he wants people that will achieve at a high level, and that's his expectation.
I would go to Glen. He was so easy to relate to. I really, looking at Glen and talking to him, I had no idea what he had amassed relative to his success in the business world. But he walked me through some of the steps of becoming an entrepreneur. And then he also told me that the experience of growing a business is as important as the results that come with the business. And that was incredibly important because at Taylor Corp and with Glen, they made sure that we did things the right way, and they wanted us to go through the process with the proper steps to develop the business with the right foundation. And here we are at 20 years. But it was back in 2009. And I called Glen. And if you remember, the economy completely crashed. And we were at the time, a 5-year company. And I told Glen and staff that we were having some issues, particularly cash flow issues. And Glen kind of smiled, and I could hear it in his voice, on the call. And he says, well, what did you expect? Did you think it was all going to be easy? And he says, don't worry, you'll get through it. And that was essentially a relatively short call. But that reassurance was the energy I needed and the energy my team needed to take the story forward, not to shut down and close our door and say to folks, okay, we tried, it didn't work. You have to work through those things. And then I started listening to and watching some of what Taylor was going through, and they were going through the exact same things. Some tough decisions, having to relocate folks or change business models. There's pain associated with that. And as a business owner, you don't have many peers. So I'll say one other thing about Glen. Glen is a extremely successful person. He's a very humble person, but he understands that being in command is lonely. You don't have very many peers. Glen avails himself when I have those issues that I can't discuss with other folks. I can call him and have those conversations.
For Glen, it was just keep it simple, be successful, give it 110%, make it work, include everybody, help people help the company be successful in the way we go.
He's an incredible listener, and he will chime in towards the end of the conversation with either really good probing questions, or a pure gold statement that says, okay, you guys, you figured it out. Now go and go fast.
He's a nice guy. He's driven. He expects results.
He loves to see people grow.
He has a way of knowing people, reaching people. People want to work for him. They want to succeed for him. There was never a dull day or a dull moment, ever.
It's really about the connections you make with people. And so what I most value is my connection to him and, the friendship and the trust that we have with each other.
For people to get along as well as we got along with the stress and the hours we put in, and I look back on it, to me, it's just phenomenal.
You develop a level of trust. You develop a level of working together. And he's such I'll call him a common person. The gentleman is like your next door neighbor, only brilliant, you know what I mean? But you just felt comfortable with him. And you could develop a respect and a trust with him that you could count on. And so there were times we had, some challenges we had to sort out, but you could always sit down with Glen and talk them through and get the solution and go from there.
So when I started at Taylor, I didn't know if Glen liked me at first. I had been hired by Greg Jackson and his daughter Jean, and he wasn't involved in the hiring process, yet I came in an assistant general counsel role, so it was a little bit more senior. I had the feeling he didn't like me. And early on, we had a situation where I needed to go to him and give him some advice that I knew he wouldn't like. And I wrestled with it. I felt a little sick to my stomach about going into his office to tell him. And he didn't take it very well at first. He yelled at me. He was not happy with me at all. And I remember thinking, I may not belong in this job at Taylor Corporation, but I felt that I had to say that to him. And it wasn't long after it, he came into my office and he had taken the advice. And he said, you know what? I like you because you challenge me. And I don't need people who are yes people. I need somebody who's going to tell me what they think. And he said, I may not always listen to what you say, but I want you to tell me what you think. And that still to this day gives me chills because it became kind of the foundation of who I've been as a professional, is even if I think something is hard to say, or if somebody doesn't want to listen to it, I feel that that's my job.
When my dad did die, my mom died 29 days later. And I can't tell you how many Taylor folks came to the funerals and the funeral home and the showing and whatnot, and were there supportive. And Glen coming down when my dad died and supporting my mom, it meant the world to her. You know, she was thrilled. You know, Glen, your boss, would actually come. You know, and yeah, he would. You know, we've been together, I don't know, 25 years or something like that by then. I think when that was 28 years is what it would have been. Yeah, 28 years, something like that.
There's a lot of great people in Taylor Corporation. And so all of my best memories are not so much the successes in business, but the moments in between the successes when you could just relate to the people. And that's how it is with me and Glen as well.
He's always gone for impact. And I remember the story that he told me when he first came up with the idea of opportunity and security for our employees. And the way that he came up with that, it was just a bolt of lightning that just struck him. And he's lived that throughout his entire career, opportunity and security for our employees. Now I live that in everything that I do, giving opportunities to people to take advantage of, and security, making sure that they feel, like they're part of something and that they are able to rely on this company for a long time. Taylor will be around for a long time, and that's due to his ability to create a sustainable culture and a sustainable business model, and to also just be very creative and strategic with the different avenues that we are investing in the company. So I'd say his legacy could be making sure that Taylor lives on to continue to provide opportunities to families for decades and centuries in the future.
He gave me an opportunity and he's given me security. And I feel an obligation back to the employees that I work with of sharing that bond, because we're a family-owned, privately held company, and we're family.
Glen is, a great leader in many ways. He's very good at delegating. I mean, he allows people to do the things that they feel they need to do.
First and foremost, he's a friend. And you can say, well, he's your boss. How can he be your friend?
I think for me, having a friend like Glen, who I've been able to share difficult times in life, that's been priceless. Okay, we've had crisis with our kids, we've had marriage crisis, we've had deaths, we've had business crisis, things that at the time were a really big deal. In hindsight, maybe they weren't quite as big a deal, but at the time there was serious pressure or serious dilemmas. To seek his counsel, or maybe better yet, to seek his ear, was really valuable for me. I knew I could trust him. I knew if I said anything to him, it wouldn't go anywhere. I knew he wasn't judgmental. It's like he'd never say anything to you like, how stupid can you be? You might think it, probably think about it yourself sometimes too, but so I would say that that's probably the most precious thing about our friendship.
He's going to surprise you. He's going to surprise you with a challenge. He's going to surprise you with his generosity, with his humor, with his kindness, with his toughness. And any given meeting, I've worked with him now for going on 35 years. He still surprises me. He's tough about things that I expected him to be kind about. He's kind about things I expected him to be tough about. He pokes holes in plans that I think are foolproof, and he compliments plans that I think are still in need of major work. And so he's just always surprising to me.
He asks great questions outside of what you're presenting, right? What's going on in your business? Why is this taking place? What happened last month? All of those things that you weren't anticipating walking into that conversation. But you know darn well after you get through that conversation that he's done his due diligence. He's looked at the reports. He knows what's going on within your business, even though there are 90 of them. And he's going to ask good questions to make sure you're leading the business the way that he needs you to and your employees need you to.
Knowing him for these many, many years, I know he's very smart. He's also very cognizant of people and wants to know people. And I think he's also a very good negotiator. But a lot of that comes from listening and then figuring out where the person's coming from, trying to do something that will make it a win for the person on the other side of the table.
This final section focuses primarily on two questions. How will you remember Glen Taylor, and what is his legacy?
He isn't a person to say, you've done a really good job, or really, but all he would do is just give a little smile, and that meant everything. Then I knew that I was on the right track and I was helping, and that's all of us needed.
I'm going to remember him just as such a fantastic mentor to me. And there's been good times and bad times in business. I remember doing a deal where it was just a fantastic business deal for 3 years until it went bankrupt. And then it was a terrible deal.
I think quietly he wants to be known as a good person. I think he wants to be known as a caretaker for Minnesota. That's a real ethic that he has. When he was involved in politics, it was out of sense of service. Buying the wolves, it was a giant business challenge, but it was also motivated to keep them here, as the Star Trib was also.
I think Glen wants to be remembered as a tough business person. I mean, he, at his core, he has very strong beliefs about what's right and what's wrong, what works and what doesn't. And he tempers that with a really good understanding of people.
I think what drives Glen is probably some of the challenges at work. I mean, he's got like I said before, he's smart, he cares about people, he listens, delegates, and has been very fortunate in business.
I call Glen the American. He's a quintessential American. He is the American story. That's how I think of Glen. The things that he's done to reach into communities and help folks that he's never met and never will meet. I see Glen as a mentor, and he'll always be a mentor. I see Glen as part of the fabric of Caracal.
The other thing that he told me is a thing I think he tells everyone, which is when you make decisions, make the decisions like you own it.
Giving people the authority and the wherewithal to go out and actually make a change without having to have 40 meetings to check up on your progress and a project management list. Because not everybody's good at that. A lot of people are good at being entrepreneurial and winging it, and they have their checklist in their head. And allowing that freedom to be yourself, and it allowed me to be myself throughout the organization. And again, I can't just emphasize how much fun it was. It just was.
Frankly, I feel like Glen developed into a friend over that period of time. And it wasn't because we saw each other weekly or even monthly in some cases, but he would always reach out, ask how things were going. And he cared about the people and the enterprise. And I'll miss that contact with Glen very, very, very much.
I appreciate the relationship, and I really appreciate that he cares, about me and Karen and the family.
My hope is that I can extend a lot more opportunities to others as well, and potentially play the same role as a mentor and a coach to many other people in the future. That excites me every time I think about it.
And he feeds off people. I love to see him interact with young kids. If he would go to a college or talk to a high school, or if kids were brought in, I love to see him. He's good with adults too, and any sort of speech he gives, but when he's talking with young kids, I think it kind of energizes him. I think he loves to see the way they eyes sparkle and they feed off of, and they'll ask him a question and it leads to another question. He's good with people like that, and I think he gets people, that's how I think he's gotten some of our better employees, that they talk to him and want to work for him.
He's incredibly intuitive. He's just incredibly intuitive. And I've been around a lot of business people in my life. Even though he's my dad, right? No bias. He's incredibly intuitive. And he's super opportunistic. He sees opportunities in things that other people don't see. And he has this courage or bravery to step in and try those opportunities and to do stuff.
I have never seen someone in a matter of 10 to 15 minutes take the highly complex, simplify it, and say, here's what we need to do, and be right as often as he is.
There's so many aspects of his leadership and him personally that I just find all of those pieces is refreshing. And I love to get all those sides from him because that only helps me become a stronger leader.
Glen's great gift as a leader is his understanding people's motivations. He's very good at reading people. He's very good at understanding that everybody has their own nuances and their own things that are important to them. And he connects with people and talks to people in relationship to their motivations of what they want to accomplish. Obviously, running a business, you have to get results and all those things, but he'll look for the right person to fit in the right role based on what would make them satisfied and meet their needs for purpose in the world. And so that's really his great strength. I mean, he really brought psychology to business. He wouldn't call it that, I don't think, but that's what I think of it as. And really, what are people's motivations? What's their fears? What's their needs? What's their desires? And really understanding all of that and bringing that into the business.
He doesn't just recognize what people's skills are. He recognizes what they care about. And he connects them to opportunities that they care about because he knows, he's demonstrated, it's not just about being good at something. It's also about caring about it.
One of his great strengths of leadership is he understands people's motivations. And he knew that I liked to figure out what I wanted to do myself, and I didn't like to be told what to do. So he was, wise in that, I'm sure. And so I'm sure some of the conversations we had, he was thinking about things that might be helpful to me. I'm sure that's true. But again, a lot of our conversations were just dialogues, and really valuable dialogues.
What do I admire most about Glen is his ability to connect with people, regardless of their position or their status or what it is they do either within the organization or outside of the organization. I admire how humble he is and his ability to connect with people.
He would listen. And there were times you didn't know if he was listening until he asked that first question, and then you knew darn well he was listening and he was ahead of you. So that's, I admired him greatly for that. And even yet today, when we haven't run into each other now for a while, but it's the aw shucks attitude of Glen. He's still there. So.
In all those meetings, and there were a lot of them, and I still, even though now that I'm not at Taylor, I get back together with him at least a couple times a year, and we sit in the same chairs in his office and talk. He never, ever told me to do anything or told me not to do anything. He always just talked with me, and he told me his problems, and I told him my problems, and honestly, somewhere in the conversation, invariably, I would leave the conversation realizing that I should do one or two things. But he never told me to do one or two things. It was just the way that we talked about it that got me a better feeling about things that either I hadn't yet recognized or I wasn't sure what to do about. So it was a unique way of learning from him, because it wasn't like a traditional teacher for me anyhow, where it was like standing up in front of the class and say, here's the things you need to know, or try this. Never was like that. It was more just communication and talking and listening, and him listening to me talk as I work things out, and me listening to him work things out and say, oh, I should be thinking about that. How does it apply to me? That was the way it worked for he and I. It was a unique relationship in my life, a very important and valuable relationship in my life, and one that I still really value.
I have people ask me all the time, how involved is Glen these days? And of course I tell them he's in the office almost every day. And of course the follow-up question to that is, well, how involved is he? And I say, he's as involved as I think he's ever been. And he's as excited as he's ever been. And to be honest with you, we're excited to have him be part of those conversations, because he adds a level of simplicity to most conversations when they get a little bit too complex for us. He adds well, you guys just need to go do it type of a mentality to the risks that we're questioning whether or not we should go spend millions of dollars on a new initiative. So what excites me about Glen being around for another 20 years is his guidance, his leadership, his wisdom, and just the friendship that he brings to being here at the organization every day.
When he talks with people, he's laser focused on those people, and he makes you feel like you're the most important people in the room. And people are always surprised by that. The great Glen Taylor will just talk to whomever you are. If you're in maintenance or you're a farmer or whatever you're doing, he drops everything and he talks, and he finds you interesting. My nephew had just graduated from college and had started his career. So he was now working for a living, which was not as much fun as college. Glen was kind enough to give us, we have tickets to the game, and Glen's so good. He comes over to talk to my nephew. And he, of course, talks in just laser focus on John, and he talks to him, and John is just blown away by Glen. Glen turns and walks away. John turns to me and goes, you must love going to work every day. What he's saying is that, and it is fun, and Glen makes it fun, but I could see John thinking, I don't have a job anywhere near this fun, and he was just, but that's what Glen can do. He just makes you feel so much a part of his whole world that you just want to join that world.
I value his honesty. I value his friendship. I value his directness. I value his broad thinking. I value his care.
He cares about people. And so whether it's his grandchildren, whether it's his neighbor, whether it's someone that wants to come to him for advice, he just thinks, gosh, if I can help you with some advice that I could give you now, and that'll make you be more successful, or help you be more successful, or help you live differently, or whatever, I think that's where his tune is right now.
But also that he's okay with letting people struggle a little bit, because that's how we learn sometimes, and where we're, what we need to learn from that, and we can apply that, what we've learned, to growing and moving forward, he's right there with us too. So
When you call Glenn, he's going to get back to you. He doesn't wait around. He doesn't let grass grow under his feet or even go to seed or start to seed, because he moves quick. And he would expect that out of everyone else around him. Make a decision. If it isn't right, make it right.
You know, like with any relationship, there's times when things are better and worse, but I always felt that I had a strong connection with him that I'm quite sure will last beyond us both.
Glenn would want a very low profile legacy. I don't think that he would want people talking about all he gave. I think he would prefer to be remembered as a valuable member of the community who, and it sounds kind of redundant, but it really is who he is, who cared about the community and hoped and would do things to help make it better. I think he's the prototypical leave something better than it was when I came. And I truly, I think we all agree that he's done that. But I just don't think that he's looking for any billboards, or that's not the kind of person he is. He's very humble in what he's done, but very sincere.
Well, I'll remember him in two ways, in very personal terms, but more broadly in professional terms. Professional terms, the greatest business person, the greatest business leader that I've ever known. Could accomplish more, had a breadth of perspective, could reach out into a variety of markets, a variety of products, services, and be successful in almost all of them. So that's it. He is the master. At a personal level, don't know of anyone who has done more for outside of my family, who has done more for me, for my family, for my personal well-being, and I'm grateful. Grateful every day to Glen Taylor. That could be hyperbole from some. From me, it's not. From me, it's not. And so wherever Glen will be on my 100th birthday, I will say, thank you, God. Thank you, Glen. You have done wonderful things for me and so many for our state and for this notion that we call business.
You know, what I most appreciate about our friendship, Glen and I, has to do with something other than the university. Obviously, we work very closely on that. And that has had a great impact on me and the university and others. I would say that Glen cares about people, and that he, over the years, we had many private conversations that were private, that never went beyond his office or my office. And what I'll remember about Glen would be the advice that he would give me. He'd never say, you need to do this, Dick, or you should do that. He would always say, well, based on what you've shared with me, it seems like these things are in motion and that maybe you need to consider doing this or doing that. But I appreciated the way in which he shared some tough advice that I needed. And I believe I'm not the only one. I know there's hundreds of people that way. But I would think that he should know and remember, as he ages, like we all are, that he impacted so many people, so many people's lives. And for me, certainly impacted my life.
I'm going to remember Glen as a mentor. At the time I worked with Glen, he was so giving of his time. He would spend time with me explaining his thought process on something, time explaining the history of something. And he loved that about his job, and that meant a lot to me, to have somebody who had accomplished as much as he had be willing to spend that time with me. I'll also remember him as somebody who helped me discover who I was as a leader. And he led so authentically and so humbly that he's somebody that I wanted to emulate.
I want him to be remembered as being a very respectful person, and for everything, his generosity, for all that he has given back to all the individuals that he has touched their lives. You know, I'm a firm believer. There's a reason for everyone that you meet in your life, and it's to make your circle of life complete. And I have met a lot of people, but I'm not done yet, and neither is he.